Hey guys, I'm Anand from AnandTech.com. I'm here with Brian Klug, our senior smartphone editor.
Hey everyone.
We are live from CES 2014 at Intel's booth. Thanks to Intel for loaning us the studio and the space. And we have, for a very short time, we have a very special guest, Herman Oil. You're VP and GM of the Mobile and Comms Group at Intel. And we only have you for like 10 minutes, but you got to run to do some important stuff.
As always.
Yeah.
But this is important as well.
No, I appreciate that. So how's the show been for you? You guys had a bunch of kind of mobile-y announcements. I know you guys typically do stuff at MWC, but how's the show been so far?
Yeah, so we are now a day in the show,
Yeah.
and the show has been great so far.
Yeah.
So we had a great keynote yesterday, a lot of announcements, and today we have a lot of questions about this and what customers can do with that, beyond our normal product roadmap that we are currently working on.
Okay, so let's talk about the normal product roadmap for a bit. The big questions, obviously, we got Merrifield coming. So we saw Bay Trail at the end of last year. I think it was one of the most promising moves we've seen from Intel, since the beginning of Atom. Now, obviously, the phone version of that is coming pretty soon. Can you give us any updates on that?
I can. So on Bay Trail, we are launching now many customers on Windows and on Android.
Right.
And
So we haven't seen any Android yet. Will we see any of that at the show?
Sure.
Okay.
Just go around and we show you multiple of them. And they are live at the show here.
And
you
they'll be
can play with
shipping
them.
this quarter, or?
Customers are shipping them.
Okay.
And they also announced platforms on this one.
Okay.
So, and on the phone version, if you want, Merrifield, it can do phones and tablets.
Right.
That is what it's designed for. And this is a 2-core solution, and it comes 64-bit. And we go full steam 64-bit on this one.
So so 64-bit is a challenging thing to do in phones right now, right? Especially if you're not Apple, right? So how is that going to work? Are all the Merrifield platforms going to be 64-bit enabled out of the box, and then there's a software discussion later on, or how does that work?
We are working now with Google and with our customers on how we do that.
Okay.
But there's a lot of work
how do you deal with there not being any 64-bit Android, essentially?
No, it's not.
Right.
But we have devices running in our labs, and I can show you one
Nice.
if you want, which is a Merrifield. It has a 64-bit kernel on it and a 32-bit Google on it,
Right.
working flawlessly. So everything what we can do, and we can do a lot of enablement work, that is what we are doing. So, and that is where we are heads on to really make this work, make that stable, and make that mature.
So 64-bit is slightly different for you guys, right? Because you guys have already made that 64-bit transition on the desktop, and the performance uplift isn't necessarily what we saw in the ARM space, right? There's a fundamental ISA difference over there, whereas on the x86 space, it's much more about memory addressability. Where do you see the use cases for 64-bit in phones that are x86?
So the use cases usually come in more heavy computing stuff, rendering stuff, transcoding applications. There is where we see the 64-bit benefit. Truly, as long as the apps are not 64-bit,
Yeah.
the benefit is fairly limited, but this will come. And we have a lot of 64-bit history. As we speak, this quarter, we bring the 64-bit Windows tablets into the market, so that's done.
Nice.
We have done so many 64-bit conversions before.
Yeah.
Some people came and teased me in a way as, okay, another 64-bit enablement, but this will be something which is fairly complex because all the apps have to get around this. And while on the other hand, we have a big software system behind our today's systems, which is all 64-bit.
Yeah.
So
the tablet story is a little different, right? Because there you have this existing 64-bit Windows install base. You start distributing this out into like enterprise and business users, and there it's kind of a more seamless fit.
sure. And tablets is a priority of us, so we go with this. But on the phone space, same thing, and it will come. I do not think that the Android system and this ecosystem will go in steps. This will go in one step.
Interesting.
Wow.
So you think it's going to be a very quick transition to 64-bit?
I believe so.
Any idea when you think that'll be?
I believe that is this year.
Really?
Wow.
That is what I bet on.
That's good. That's good.
The technology is there, so
Yeah.
why should we wait? Usually we want to have technology much faster than we ever can develop it.
Yeah.
And this time it's the other way around. We have the technology, so ready
Right.
to go.
So there was another announcement at the end of last year, a project called Sophia.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's we didn't get a chance to cover it publicly yet, but now we can kind of do that here. Can you tell us a little bit about Sophia?
Yeah, Sophia is targeting the entry part of the smartphone segment.
Yeah.
And we bring this to the market towards the end of the year. It comes in 2 steps, in the 3G version and quickly followed by an LTE version. And with this, we go also into the mass market volume of the smartphones.
So Sophia is interesting because it's an Infineon SoC that you guys have put IA into, right?
That is true. We have derived it from our ultra successful feature phone platforms.
Yeah.
They have been optimized over years on cost competitiveness. They have a high integration level, which is unbeaten.
Yeah.
And we took that platform and said, that is the right launch pad.
Have you guys publicly announced what core you're putting in there?
We have not publicly announced, but I can at least come back to the former theme, and it's 64-bit.
Okay, so
nice.
that's kind of cool because that platform has always been a cost-effective platform, right? So you don't have high-performance cores in there to begin with, but you guys only have one 64-bit mobile core. That's cool. And you guys also aren't talking about what GPU that you put in there as well.
We have not released that publicly.
Okay.
But assume it is an entry device.
Okay.
So it's not hunting for the highest GPU performance, rather for exactly what that market needs.
Gotcha. Well, I know you got to run. They're kind of giving me signals. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so now we can get back to all of the stuff we've been working on.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So unrelated to mobile, I did a whole bunch of work on Mac Pro over the holidays. Like literally Christmas Eve, I took a little bit of time Christmas Day to not work on the Mac Pro, but then worked on it nonstop. I'm curious, what do you think about that design, right? Like, cause you.
Yeah, I don't like how everybody just talks about it being like a trash can.
Yeah.
Which
Do you
now
mind its
I
ID?
just did. No, I don't mind the idea at all. I think that there's a lot of focus on it.
Yeah.
But I think it's better to see, obviously, the platform starting to move on into something else.
Yeah.
And that Apple has grand vision for it. So I guess you could sort of read into the new ideas there as a statement that, hey, this is something we're committed to. We're going to continue evolving.
Yeah. Well, for me,
I feel like people focused entirely on that too much. But
yeah, so for me, if you look at the options, there are a lot of people that just wanted the big box again.
Right.
And I get that, but at the same time, I don't know, I feel like that already exists in the market.
Sure.
Right? Maybe it doesn't run OS 10, but it already exists in the market.
Right.
What doesn't exist in the market is like really, really good innovation at the small form factor level.
Right.
Right? Even in the PC space, it's beyond frustrating that all we have are these like mini ITX chassis that are more or less unimaginative, right? Like they're just, I don't know, they look like either variants of those old shuttle boxes or they're kind of really, really tiny and just a pain to work in.
Right.
Like and it's one of the downsides to, having this like insane amount of standardization, right? In that, everyone wants these blocks that they can move and put everywhere, but no one's willing to kind of go out on a limb and design something weird.
I think it's the evolution of obviously the focus on mobile and integration that results in, parts that, like they made their own GPU form factor.
Yeah.
They made their own form factor for obviously the motherboard.
Yep.
Obviously power supply is not standard too.
Yeah.
So I think the reality is that, a lot of that, I've kind of resigned myself. Initially there was some, I was against sort of that happening to notebooks.
No, I know, I remember
2.5-inch drives going away, DIMMs going away. Now I kind of understand more why, that decision was made from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I think it's the best thing in the world for the long term. Obviously we do make some sacrifices. But are the trade-offs worth it when you actually end up using it? I don't know. It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you see reflected in the Mac Pro.
So I thought the shared heatsink design was the more I used it, the more I'm like, hey, this is actually really cool.
Well, initially we were really concerned because it's like, hey, sharing the thermal load across the same core is going to result in other things getting warmer when they're not being used and adding to thermal stresses, but you seem pretty pleased with it now.
Yeah, it was all right. So the perspective I didn't have was, I was concerned about thermal load, right?
Right.
And in using it,
Even though you made it throttle once,
I
but
did
you had
make
to
it
like
throttle.
push it really hard.
Yeah, with like 24 threads of Prime 95
Right.
and running
Furmark, yeah.
And some people, I saw a lot of commenters saying that Furmark is totally a valid workload, but you got to remember this was a workload that even the GPU vendors treat like a power virus, right?
Sure,
and
sure.
have to cap it on their own end.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I think it's possible to make anything throttle.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. But yeah, so like the one obvious thing is there are still, in terms of heterogeneous compute, like there are not many apps that are just really targeting all 3 cores.
Right.
And as a result, that a shared heatsink makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Right? Like it actually towards the end
Like
of
a
the,
shared TDP essentially.
Exactly. And I feel like that's kind of the extension of the CPU with integrated everything else.
Sure.
Right? CPU and graphics on one die. If you want more performance, why not have CPU and graphics on one die, graphics on another die, and then a shared thermal unit?
Right.
Um,
What I thought was interesting is that, initially I said I wanted the 12 core just to be ridiculous.
yeah.
But obviously the better part of the optimization curve is really one of the other two, the 8
Yeah.
or, a 4
Yeah.
even.
Or a 6.
Or
right?
a 6, right.
Yeah, the turbo states it's interesting to me that like they don't all follow the exact same turbo core down.
Right, yeah.
Which indicates that there's clearly there is a penalty that you pay,
Sure.
right, as you go to these higher core counts. Turbo isn't infallible.
Right.
But yeah, the one thing that I didn't really have good perspective on that I got as I was working on this, I'm talking to Ryan Smith, our GPU editor, and I'm talking about the specs and the configuration, and he's like, oh, those are low-end GPUs.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah.
even the highest end GPUs,
Sure.
from his perspective, those are low-end GPUs
Right.
because he's used to reviewing 780 Ti's
Yeah.
and 290Xs. And when you look at it through that perspective, yeah, maybe the shared thermal load isn't that big of a deal.
Sure.
Right? Because these aren't like 350 watt
it's not,
GPUs.
yeah, something absurd.
That also brings up the interesting point of what do you do next generation?
Right.
Because you have to wait for a process node shrink. Otherwise, we're already teetering at the
Or
edge.
you just extrude it and make it really tall.
Yeah,
Like,
I see a lot of
I don't
people
think that's
saying
going to
that.
happen.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
Just extrude it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, they're
Yeah.
just going to make it bigger. But I
Yeah.
feel like this is clearly a very expensive thing to tool, right?
Yeah, and
they're
Apple
building
doesn't
in the
redesign
US.
their chassis
Exactly.
more than once every 2 years.
Yeah. But I was pretty pleased, this was the first Ivy Bridge EP platform that I've used where all PCIe lanes were in use.
Right.
Right? Like normally when I reviewed Ivy Bridge E, I was like, there's a lot of PCIe, I just don't need it.
Sure.
But here, literally everything was put to use,
Right.
which I thought was kind of cool.
Well, I got really behind on the Talk.
Yes.
I was still working on Talk.
So how's
which
that?
I'm
You're wearing
wearing. Yeah, I'm wearing it. It's got the color Mirasol display. I don't think you'll be able to see it on the video, but
So can
it's
you
an
explain
interesting watch.
Mirasol, why is that an interesting type of display?
so it's a reflective display. It's not emissive.
Okay.
So what that means is that to show color, you need light to shine on it. So
Interesting.
they have a front light that you can toggle on by tapping on this part of the band,
Oh, okay.
and that shines light into it. Or when you're outside, light naturally shines into it.
So how is outdoor viewing performance and stuff like that?
Oh, it's excellent. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
But obviously the best part is that it sort of marries what's good about like the Pebble type displays, like
Yeah.
the
E-ink or
paper.
whatever.
Yeah, there's e-paper and e-ink, and I always get them confused.
Yeah.
But I believe it's e-paper is what's in the Pebble, but it's kind of like an LCD
Yeah.
that they refresh every couple seconds or so.
Okay.
But this works the same way in that it doesn't cost a lot of power to hold the same image.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting methodology that they have these, essentially every pixel is like an interferometer, a Fabry Perot. So you can turn the pixel on and off
Yeah.
by moving this membrane up and down. And that changes the way your cavity resonates. And that will move it to being either on or off. And you still need subpixels
Yeah.
to show color, so they still have subpixels. But you can create this color, sort of appearance. And it's a little bit muted, but it's interesting because it's sort of a place in between the two extremes right now.
Yeah, which is, we have Samsung with just a straight up OLED screen.
Right.
And then, we have the Pebble types of
Yeah,
devices.
black and white, not even grayscale. So I think that alone makes it interesting, just
Yeah.
the display. And battery life is great too. It's on the order of a week.
That's
I was
good.
measuring between 8 and 10% drain per day.
Okay.
So you can easily get 10 days out of it.
So is that, you had some comments around that with Galaxy Gear where you were
Sure.
like, look, if it's to be a watch, it needs to last more than whatever 6
Right,
hours.
yeah, I was making the argument that if it doesn't last at least a week, or more than
Is that the
more than a
threshold?
smartphone charge cycle, which is like once a day or once every 1.5 days.
So what is the threshold for you? What's the minimum for it to be a viable product?
I would say a week,
gotta be
yeah.
engineers
Just if
that
I'm
are
going to
looking
pick
at
an
that.
arbitrary number, I would say 5 days.
5 days display on the entire time though.
Yeah. Well, and it's not a watch if it doesn't show the time all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with
It's
that.
a connected accessory.
Yeah, I agree with
Or
that.
or a wearable, whatever we're going to call wearable.
But so I saw some people on Twitter actually bringing that up, right? That hey, these things aren't designed to be watches. It's a different type of thing.
I don't know if I agree with that. It's
I
worn on
don't-
my wrist. It shows the time. It's a
And
watch.
from my
It's even
perspective,
called a watch.
I'm not going to put anything on my wrist unless it's got to do more for me. Like it has to
Yeah.
at least bare minimum, it has to serve the purpose of a watch.
Right. And I started the review out just by saying that, and it's not published yet, but that all of this is really very nascent, and even the base feature set,
Yeah.
we don't really know what that is yet. Like,
So-
what are the user's expectations for a watch? Like,
Yeah.
delivering notifications is maybe, the most basic thing.
Yeah.
Telling time, obviously, even more basic. Call screening seems to be something that you need to have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it, really. Like,
Well, so
it's not really defined beyond that. Like, pedometer. Nobody
been-
has a health and fitness story.
Yeah, you've
know.
been saying this a lot actually at the show, which is all of this is premature.
It's very premature, yeah.
Do
Well,
you
and the
think-
only
I mean,
one-
what about form factor, right?
Sure.
Like, so Google obviously this is the form factor they
Yeah.
prefer, and that works for people like me.
Even
And-
though I
and-
think they'll have a watch too eventually.
yeah, but do you think like if one form factor is clearly going to be the one that gets
The
broader
social adoption is easier with a watch than it is something that's worn on your face.
Interesting.
And that's
Do you
ultimately
think that's
the
true even if they shrink it to where it's kind of
well, I don't know how much you could shrink glass even more without it just still being something on your face.
okay?
You know? I
So
mean,
you
wearing
think-
a watch it's like it looks like a normal watch.
Yeah. What about like some sort of like necklace?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd wear a
Like a
pendant.
Flavor Flav
Although,
clock
I've
or
seen
something?
I've seen pendants that are cameras.
Yeah.
Like I saw one today at Ambarella.
Yeah.
They have a camera for Google Helpouts.
Yeah.
Essentially like Hangouts, but instructing, and it gives you the utility of your arms.
Yeah.
So that you can have a camera showing what you're working on and also use your arms.
Yeah.
So like that sort of stuff makes sense.
Do you need a display? Because Intel did that whole like
Sure.
wearable that's just a headpiece.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions here that aren't really answered, and I agree with you. I'm not totally convinced that adding more screens is going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
I would rather have something that enriches my life by delivering just the right notification
Yes.
at the right time.
But so to
Like,
do
wouldn't
that,
it be great if like Herman, he had to go and then you get a vibrate and that's like it just knows or
Yeah.
something like that.
But so that argument, like you almost have to have a software story then. Like you can't.
Right, yeah,
You
yeah.
cannot be just a hardware wearable player. You have to.
And
you got to be an OS
more than that,
provider.
you have to own the underlying platform.
Yeah.
Or at least be able to make that body integrate the right APIs.
Yeah. So that kind of leaves Microsoft, Apple, Google then.
Yeah, or I think, to some extent, Google will be open to making the API open for everybody else.
Yeah.
I think even Apple, they have API, I forget the name of the new API now,
Yeah.
but they will deliver all notifications over this open channel,
Yeah.
which Pebble uses, and we wrote about that. So I don't know that I would say that the OS partners are necessarily hostile
Yeah.
to the idea of them not being, having full ownership over this experience, but obviously they're the ones that need to make it possible
Yeah.
before it's really credible.
So you mentioned Pebble a couple times. You met with them today,
Yeah.
and you're a Pebble owner user.
Yes, I mean, even though I know it's kind of weird, we never really formally reviewed it.
Yeah.
I feel like that happens a lot. Like things I don't fully understand what they are,
Yeah.
I don't really write about in the same sort of format because number one, I don't know how to codify it totally, and number two, I don't. At that point, Pebble was sort of it wasn't fully fleshed out
Yeah.
in the way it was today. But
Well, and that's part of what we do, right? Like it's I would rather not publish than publish something that is not that I don't have a good grasp on.
Well, and they're living, breathing pieces, and
Yeah.
I don't want to say that should live on forever. My 1 week, week one into this,
Yeah.
because literally it was like first week in there, I got that thing. That my experiences then would mirror what I have now.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
That's very true.
So they launched a new SDK. They have a new, they have an app store essentially.
Okay.
Essentially everything that you can make the case they should have had at launch sort of has been fleshed out now, like bidirectional communication for apps, watch faces, all that good, enriched data services.
What's the biggest feature in your eyes as a Pebble user? What's the thing you're most excited about?
I don't know. To me, the Pebble is still best at just delivering notifications and call screening.
Okay.
Like its feature set is a little bit limited.
Notification overload, right? Like you can't.
Yeah, although you can use like Pebble Notifier on Android and select what you want.
Okay.
Ultimately, I still think that selecting just the contact per se, and getting all the notifications from them isn't enough filtering for me.
Okay.
Like
what kind of
I want
do you
contextual filtering. Like I get home, and it doesn't deliver any notifications.
Okay.
Because ostensibly I'm on my computer, or I could just walk to it, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm obviously driving my car. Only deliver calls, for example. Don't show me text.
Okay.
Don't even provide the temptation, right? Or I'm walking around. Give me everything, right?
Okay.
So that sort of
Are
contextual
those the three
awareness.
modes to you?
I think there's more, but I'm not going to share all of them.
That's fine. That's fine.
But like those are the easy cases that I think it's surprising nobody's really nailed down or maybe delivered a compelling example of.
Yeah.
And
there's new hardware with
so there's the Pebble Steel, which retains essentially the same display, the same platform.
Okay.
So like apps that are built against the first version are also able to run on the second version.
Okay.
But it's metal, as the name sort of gives away.
Okay.
And it's got a nice band with a clasp.
Which is one of your original complaints about.
Yeah, one of my original frustrations is that the industrial design of all these watches is plasticky. Like even this, it's kind of it's great, but it's obvious that it's kind of a technology demonstrator.
Yeah.
It's not really like a timepiece.
Yeah.
So they're trying to make that step. I don't know if it's really to that level yet, but I mean it's glass now. The band seems nice. The industrial design is a lot better.
When you didn't get one yet?
No, but they published their release date, and we'll write about it. And
okay.
We'll have a review this time. So yeah.
And then some phone stuff happened here.
Right.
So Asus announced they announced they're now a partner of AT&T. They're going to bring Padphone X over here.
Right.
But
which is awesome.
Yeah.
And we've been begging them to do that for like 2 years now.
It's interesting to see Asus as a company, right? Because they were, motherboard maker, but motherboard maker that transitioned to a notebook maker.
Right.
Notebook maker that transitioned to a successful notebook maker.
Right.
And then now they've made this kind of, or they're at the
Android, then at tablets, and now kind of this intermediary, and now phones.
Yeah, they're now making that new mobile transition.
Right.
So Padphone X comes to AT&T. It's got LTE.
And it has VoLTE and carrier aggregation.
So VoLTE, is that active on AT&T right now?
I don't think that's launched right now.
Okay.
I would expect that to launch the same time they launched HD Voice, which they also said they'd launch.
Yeah, okay.
And I would have loved to be at the AT&T Dev Conference, but I know we had other stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to be everywhere, but yeah.
So they announced that, but honestly what was really interesting to me is the rest of the stuff they announced.
Sure.
Right? So they
announced me too, to be honest.
The Zenfone family. So there's a Zenfone, and these are all.
And we've been pressuring them to make phones forever.
Yes.
And in fact, technically one of the first devices I ever held in this capacity, working for AnandTech, was the Windows Phone 7 made by Asus.
Yeah.
Like at Mix 9 or whatever that was.
And prior to that, I remember years ago they got into the Windows PDA space.
Right, yeah.
And they built all these great thin iPack alternatives.
Right.
And I remember just being super happy about that.
I feel like their bar was higher than what those products were.
Yes.
And that's the hesitation.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
the Zenfone family shows up. These are all Clover Trail Plus devices. They all use Intel's, I think, 6360 mode.
Nice.
So not LTE.
Yeah.
And they're available in 3 different sizes. There's a 4-inch, a 5-inch, and a 6-inch, which I think is...
That's the right combination.
That's absolutely the right combination.
Yeah.
The 4-inch is, they all feel really good for, their first phones.
Nice.
They feel really good. These are cheap phones, right? Less than $200 for all of them. Not
mass market, mid-range.
Yeah, absolutely. But the ZenBook, or the Zenfone 4 starts at $99 or something like that.
Right. Wow.
Right. So these are super affordable phones.
Right.
And I don't know. They all have decent screens.
Were they all built pretty well? You thought they were all pretty nice?
Yeah, wow. I thought so. They also have Zen UI, which is Asus's their customization for Android.
Yeah.
Not all of that was working, but you saw some of the screenshots that we
published. I didn't think it looked all bad.
Yeah.
I think it probably would have served them better to just go stock or.
Really?
Yeah, that seems to be the trendy thing right now. And
interesting.
obviously it costs less if you want to get to market really quick.
Yeah.
It's probably the right way to do it.
See, I kind of...
Google got a good reaction. I mean, Motorola got a good reaction.
That's true. And I think ultimately maybe everyone ends up there, but I feel like this
Right.
is a great way of them establishing a brand identity.
Sure.
Right? And
Well,
saying,
they already had it, but I don't know what that was ever called. Like Padphone kind of runs their own custom UI.
yeah, but it was very...
I don't know that it was named.
It was very similar to stock,
Sure.
right? It's just slightly different.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like a dramatic visual
Wow.
departure.
Huh.
But yeah, all the phones felt decent. They're doing some
Excuse
sort of the Zenfone 5 and 6 do some sort of like low light pixel binning mode.
Right.
And the effect, at least the one they demonstrated, was pretty impressive.
Huh.
I mean, shots in low light go from being totally unusable to, hey, this
Sure.
is not bad.
They have f2.0 optics too, I
Yeah,
think,
absolutely. On the higher phones, on the I think 5 and 6, not
Nice.
on the 4. But yeah, the camera's fast. The camera UI is all right. I don't know. It's cool to see them doing it. I keep telling them they need to sell them directly.
Yeah, that's the thing is I would love to see them, just go on Newegg and here's the phone.
I think that would be awesome,
Or-
especially if we're talking about like $99 to $200.
Yeah, and it needs to have the right banding. Just give me all the banding you can get.
Yeah.
Or at least at the high end, just give me all the banding you can.
Yeah.
So that's really my hesitation with Moto G is that, there's so many variants of that thing.
Yes.
And that's purely a function of cost.
Yeah.
And really, if you want a lot of bands so that you really have the economies of scale
Yeah.
with just one device, you need to also absorb all that cost by, having this more expensive band set,
Yeah.
which is sort of ironic, but I don't know. I don't know if they disclosed any of the bands for those phones. Or...
No, they did actually at their booth, and I have a list, but I haven't published
Right.
it yet.
Cool.
And all of them support the same bands. And honestly, these ones aren't coming to the U.S. unfortunately.
Sure, yeah.
At some point, I get the impression they will. And I'm with you. I want to be able to, I'm buying an SSD and a motherboard and just add a phone, like a Zen phone,
Yeah,
and Newegg,
right.
or Amazon or whatever.
Or they bundle it or something. I
Yeah.
mean, they have a unique opportunity that they can make it work.
Yes.
And explore. Obviously bridging that sort of PC space, leadership.
Mhm.
And bringing that into the mobile with the new brand.
And I look at what's been happening with T-Mobile, right? Like this,
Yeah,
it's clear that
I'm excited for that tomorrow. Really excited.
That's tomorrow where
Wednesday.
they have their big announcement.
Uncarrier 4.0.
Yeah, and you recently switched to T-Mobile.
Yeah, I did, and I've been kind of like waiting to write a big thing about here's why I switched, and I don't know, I got behind on a bunch of stuff, but yeah.
So I want to ask you some more about T-Mobile and your experiences there. The other cool thing is I got to play with the Padphone Mini,
Nice.
right? Which was it's kind of like I guess it's a 4-inch device into a 7-inch tablet.
Nice.
It's actually reasonable. Like it's
Nice.
The tablet's really light. Like I can totally see the use case.
Right.
And you can separate the two or add them back in the middle of a call.
Oh, cool.
Right. So you can answer a call in tablet mode and then realize that, hey, I want to keep doing this call, and then pull the phone out and throw the tablet in your bag or purse or whatever, and just continue the phone call. But yeah, I thought ergonomics, I thought weight, I thought everything was done really well.
I think
on that
Asus
device.
does a good job, and I don't know. I'm impressed to see that they're finally actually coming to the U.S.
Yes. Yeah, I hope this is the beginning of a lot.
Right. Yeah, me too.
So I want to get to your Sony phone that you got, but tell me a little bit more about T-Mobile. So you were on AT&T.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong really with AT&T. I just felt like, T-Mobile was starting to make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I had always advocated going to the operator that was the best for the industry.
Yes.
Obviously, like Verizon especially, you would just hear from OEMs like on background, or they would tell you just directly.
Tell you, don't ever say this as you say this.
Yeah, well, I mean, they would always say the same thing. They would say, like, well, Verizon is a difficult partner to work with, or something like that. And I think the industry in general, has seen this huge revolution on the hardware side, right? I don't want to say commoditization, but we've seen, competition across price, hardware, features, SoC, everything.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously the network side in the United States really hasn't seen that sort of evolution. And if anything, it's been kind of regressing.
Yeah.
In terms of pricing, we have LTE now. We don't have these other things, like pricing and contracts that make sense.
Yeah.
So I decided to finally put my money where my mouth is, or whatever idiom you choose, and switch to T-Mobile because really, I was paying for all these lines myself.
Yeah.
For testing or what have you, and I could save essentially $100 a month on my plan, and that's just my experience. so I did it, and it just made financial sense for me.
Yeah.
And really, there were like 2 or 3 things that came together. Obviously, launching LTE in a lot of markets,
Yeah.
with 10 megahertz at least, 20 in some. Launching Band 2, 1900 megahertz.
Yeah.
WCDMA there for 3G makes it possible for me to use all these international phones, which is really what I need, and on older phones, and sort of solve the indoor building propagation problems that I was having.
So, but that's still an issue on LTE, right?
The indoor, yeah, it's still an issue there.
Yeah. Because that's the one thing.
But at least you get 3G, sort of.
Yeah.
I would say there definitely is a trade-off with coverage on T-Mobile, but it's, I'd always had a T-Mobile like prepaid line that I would carry around.
Yeah.
And it's definitely improved as just a result of lighting up that carrier.
Interesting.
And as a result of, them continuing to build out their network.
Yeah.
So those things, just the combination contributed. Obviously, then I can also have unlimited data.
And you haven't yet tried the international roaming.
I haven't yet tried it, but yeah, that was kind of the moment. I was in London when they made that announcement, and that's kind of when it clicked for me that this would be really useful to have.
Yes.
I don't want to sound like a T-Mobile ad, but really, those were the things that kind of sold me.
Yeah.
And HD voice, and now I guess AT&T is going to have HD voice, AMR wideband, really.
Well, we've seen just in response to this, like, this is like the perfect example of what competition does, right?
Yeah, we need that sort of disruption, or that's a buzzword, but we really need an industry player that makes the other industry players move along, and start making this more of a commodity. And I know that's scary for everybody, especially the operators.
Yeah.
Which probably means it's a good thing, but I mean that's the reality.
Yeah. So in Raleigh, I went out and in prep for this because I'm in a similar situation. I have like 5 lines.
Right.
And not all of them need to be on AT&T. And so I went out, got a prepaid SIM, and started testing it.
Sure.
And there was definitely a reduction in performance. Still acceptable, but definitely.
Which is weird because I think you're in a 5 megahertz AT&T market.
Yeah, you always expect my AT&T performance to be a lot lower than it is.
But the maximum you can get is 36 megabits.
Yes. And I don't get that, but there's a lot of, let's say, range in the 12 to 28 megabit range, and I see a lot of that, especially around 20. On T-Mobile, I'm typically maybe half that.
Right.
Still not bad, right? Especially if you're saving a considerable amount of money.
Yeah. One of my questions is that
is a problem.
The backhaul I feel like isn't fully provisioned for a lot of the 10 megahertz markets they have.
Interesting.
So I mean that's just a function of they need to pay more.
Yeah. Backhaul being you have the cell tower, but it still has to get on the internet somehow.
Yeah. Back to the core network. So even in my market, there are some cell sites that I feel like even though there's no traffic at all on it, and that's really what it is for me. It's not loaded at all.
Yeah. But performance
really the backhaul
is
where it's not where it needs to be.
Yeah, I saw that actually a lot when I did Sprint LTE testing down in Atlanta.
Yeah, Sprint is kind of in the same sort of position, although I feel like their propagation story was even worse for a time.
Yes.
But I don't know, the T-Mobile story is an interesting to international readers, which I'm sure that we'll hear about, but I think in the US it's been a really unfortunate story for a while.
Yeah.
And it's good to see at least some competition.
No, I agree. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. So you got a Sony phone, finally. This showed up right before CES.
Yeah, I mean, they offered to send it before CES.
Are you allowed to show this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, I believe so. You can do hands-on. So, I mean, this is Z1S, which is a T-Mobile phone. It's exclusive to T-Mobile, and it's essentially the Z1, but just for T-Mobile.
Okay, so I haven't been following Sony phones that much.
Yeah.
So what's the Z1?
Z1 is
Z8974,
2.2 gigahertz, 5-inch display.
1080p?
It's got the 1080p display.
What kind of display is that?
It's their own Sony display. It's not IPS.
Okay, but it's an LCD technology.
Yeah, it's not AMOLED. The camera is interesting because it's 20 megapixels and it's a big sensor.
Oh, really? Is it their own
over
sensor?
2.3 inches? Yeah, it's their own Sony Exmor RS sensor.
20 megapixels. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a big number of pixels.
It's not. Do you know pixel size?
I believe they're 1.1 micron. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, they have a lot of them. They also do that, 2x2 bin.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm still testing it.
Yeah, you've only
there'll
had
be
it
a
for
review
like a handful
later.
of days.
Yeah, and reviews are embargoed for a while, which I think is okay to say. But
we'll find out.
Yeah, I'm impressed with Sony. Like just before that, I got the Z1 or Xperia Z Ultra,
Okay.
the Google Play Edition and the normal one.
Yeah.
And I was playing with those, and I think they've come a long way. And
Interesting.
it's very surprising.
It wasn't that long ago that Sony was just like a forever behind platform.
Right.
But now, not only on, they're on leading edge technology, you're saying that they're not bad, and you can actually correlate that to what's going on with their notebooks too.
Right, yeah,
right?
I feel like across the board they've really stepped it up.
Because they are the first, their Haswell Ultrabook that we have. That's the first one that in the PC space that actually can rival MacBook Air in terms of battery life.
Right.
Which was
Interesting.
I assume for
Do they use LPDDR3 as well?
I think so.
Okay.
Jared did that review.
Yeah.
And I haven't taken it apart, but it's interesting to me because prior to that review hitting, right? And I even talked to Microsoft about this, right? Around the Surface Pro 2 or Surface 2 Pro, whatever, launch time frame. I just assumed that battery life on Windows was like a systemic OS problem.
Right.
And I did a call with Microsoft, and they were like, "No, you got to look at the Sony thing." And we'd reviewed it at that point, and I looked at the graphs, and I'm like, "You're right. This is the first platform that we've reviewed in maybe forever."
Yeah, I think like Z Ultra, which was 8974,
Yeah.
and Z1, and now Z1S, which is the T-Mobile specific version.
Yeah.
They've started to become a very credible player once again. And there's also the smaller version, the Z1 Compact.
How much
which
smaller?
is, I believe it's 4.3 inch diagonal.
Okay.
I mean, we wrote it up, but I can't remember off the spot. But
Yeah.
it's of a smaller size. It's
Yeah.
not 5 inches.
So, the thing that I really liked about what Motorola did with, I got to play with your Moto G,
Right.
which I thought was
Right.
awesome. Like surprisingly
It's surprisingly good, isn't it?
It
Right.
really is. Like it's. I would be totally fine recommending that if they had, especially if they had LTE, that would be perfect.
Sure.
But one of the things that really stands out to me about that and the Moto X, the Moto X is one of the Android phones that I just can't get out of my head because they really have really, really good feel. Like it's
Yes.
ergonomically a very good device to hold.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Um,
and that carries over to the G, I think, really well.
Yes, I agree. It's a little more dense feeling.
Yeah, it's a little wider.
But that's what bothers me about this phone. It feels, it's nice and thin, and I like that.
Sure.
And I like that kind of slate design.
Right.
But it doesn't feel as nice as the Moto X.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're in that part of the market cycle where industrial design is really important.
Yeah.
And I know that maybe people don't get that or we put too much emphasis, but it's I was talking to another OEM and they were like, well, it used to be, do we have the good platform? Do we have the best SoC? Now it's like everybody has that. You can buy it.
Yeah.
Just spend the right dollar amount.
Yeah.
So now it's things like, do you have the best camera? Do you have the best display? Do you have the best audio?
Yes.
And then industrial design, or and rank the four however you want. But it's really those that differentiate now. Like everybody has Android to some
Which is
extent.
funny because that's the exact point we got to in the PC market not too
Sure.
long ago.
Right.
Right.
Exactly, and it's the same thing.
It's just on an accelerated schedule.
Right, and there's really only one player there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you have another that sort of comes in with some competitive pressure.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah, the mobile space is kind of the same, or at least in the Android microcosm.
Yes.
If we're not examining, Windows Phone, which is really Nokia phone, you know.
So the other big news in mobile was Nvidia's stuff that happened.
Yeah.
Right. So
we're going totally out of chronological
no,
order
we are.
here.
It's
Yeah.
just I don't know why we're in this order,
Yeah.
but it's what's
It's
coming
okay.
in my head. So Tegra K1, what we thought was going to be called Tegra 5.
Yes.
We'll talk about the big story
Which makes
here.
it sound like it's the first real canonical
It is
SoC, which it basically is.
It
yeah.
totally is. This is the first one that uses what they're good at.
Well, yeah, what made Nvidia actually, credible in the graphics
absolutely.
side.
So the cool part is this not only signals, and it's a cool part for a mobile editor, and I know it's something that upsets Ryan Smith, our GPU editor, but this marks the beginning of mobile-first architecture design for NVIDIA, right? So Maxwell, everything going forward, it's designed first for mobile, and then they kind of scale up and do other implementations for desktop and notebook. That's huge, right? That's actually what Intel did not too long ago.
Exactly.
On the CPU side. So, anyways, we get that, and with K1 you get a single SMX of Kepler.
Right.
Right. And
5 A15s.
Yeah, 5 A15s.
4+1.
4+1. The GPU is really the exciting part of that.
Yeah,
right?
no,
So
I agree.
The A15s are interesting because they are R3P3. They're the latest rev of
and it's
Cortex
HBM
A15.
now.
Yes. So new process, new rev of the core, and that row of the card doesn't really change much on the performance side, but it there's like more fine-grained clock.
Yeah,
gating
there's
and
more
stuff.
power islands or something
Yeah.
too.
So better power efficiency, higher clock, better process. You know, you get some boost in power efficiency.
Right.
And I wrote about this in our article, but I feel like whenever someone makes those claims, they kind of end up being irrelevant because they just ship at whatever the max frequency is regardless. Right?
Well, yeah, I feel like the clocks are decided after the fact, or, you know,
because like Nvidia
competitive
loves,
pressure is increased.
Yeah, they love doing these charts that are just, hey, we can deliver the same performance at lower power.
Yeah.
But no OEM ever takes advantage of that.
Right.
Right? Every OEM.
Well, they don't keep it at ISO, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They always want to say, okay, I ran at 1.9 before. This can go up to 2.3, so I'm just going to run at 2.3.
Right.
But even then, I think there's supposed to be some efficiency improvements on the CPU side. So that story is pretty decent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they said lower dynamic power.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah. Big process shift. That's
right.
important.
Right.
I feel like that's what we've seen in mobile throughout, right? It's just process enables everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the state of things, it seems.
Yeah.
That and thermals.
Yes.
Which I guess are really the same problem, but...
Yeah. But the GPU is exciting, and it's really exciting to me because, you know, so...
Full OpenGL on Android.
OpenGL on Android, full OpenGL on Android, ES, DX11, CUDA, like everything. Like it's a full-blown Kepler. It's not... It did not lose anything. Even FP64 performance is there. It lost nothing in translation. I guess like fewer ROPs.
Sure.
But otherwise, it lost nothing in transition to mobile, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, right. No, it totally is.
And you know, they did a bunch of demos and they put up this chart, and the chart's not perfect, right? But they put up this chart looking at raw horsepower and compute power memory bandwidth for Xbox 360.
This is what everybody's been talking about, and you've been trying to compute for a long time.
It has been, right? And the idea is that, you know, everyone's been saying, hey, mobile devices are going to get to previous gen console level of performance.
Then current gen.
Yes. Yeah, at the time it was
current gen.
And K1 is the first time where we can actually, you know, viably make that argument, right? Like, so it's more compute than what was in Xbox 360 or PS3, less memory bandwidth, you know, there's some, you know, less texturing performance, stuff like that, but we're in the same range, right? We're in the range where
same order of magnitude, at least.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, I used to say that the thing that kept deep gaming experiences off of mobile, it was three factors. It was user interface ergonomics, right? I can't play Halo on a screen. There was the hardware. I couldn't physically port Halo over. And then there was the business case, right? No one's going to spend $50 million building a game that they're going to sell for $5.
Right.
I feel like K1 signals the beginning of the hardware argument going away. And we've seen a lot of guys doing like dockable controllers for phones.
Well, and they were saying APIs too.
Exactly.
You know, like OpenGL ES has its shortcomings.
Correct.
And obviously you need to change your rendering engine and all this other stuff to make it fit within the nuances. So now you can just put the whole thing on there.
Absolutely. So you can do all of that, right? It's an easier port than it's ever been before.
Right. Exactly.
Still not trivial, but I guess they said they ported Serious Sam 3 over in like a week or something.
Yeah. Which I'm surprised they didn't show any of that, really.
Yeah, I'm not sure
keynote.
why.
Yeah.
I guess we're allowed to say that, though, right?
I think so. Well, we just did. I know we took pictures of a bunch of that stuff. Yeah,
that's true.
There were a number of games.
So
they showed Trine. That one definitely, Trine 2.
Yeah, that's true. So it's now possible to make that console transition over to mobile. And I don't know, I wouldn't mind carrying a phone in like a little controller case or something.
Right.
And just play Halo or something like that if I'm waiting in line somewhere, or if I'm just at CES waiting for my next meeting.
Sure.
Right?
I think you don't want to gamble?
But so to me, that's really exciting. And so that gets announced. And even if, you know, they've had trouble getting design wins and stuff like that, but it at least raises the bar on graphics performance.
Yes.
And it raises it to an interesting point for me.
Right.
The other interesting part of this is they're going to offer a version of K1 by the end of this year with Denver.
Right.
Their 64-bit ARM core. They haven't said anything about it. Pretty sure, based on all of the stuff we've heard, that this is the binary translation, code morphing architecture that Nvidia was going to, you know, rumored to build an x86 chip based off of, but now it's an ARM chip.
It's interesting to me too that there's so much emphasis on 64-bit before there's even 64-bit Android.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's so.
I mean, because we saw it up there, but it's like, well, you know, it says that, but it's still 32-bit.
Yeah,
Android,
that's true.
right?
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. It's very clear that 64-bit is now a must-have feature for this year.
Yes.
And like Herman said, I kind of prefer those types of transitions.
Yeah.
Right? I don't like this whole we're going to indefinitely move towards heterogeneous computing. I want like a smooth or a very, very swift sort of, hey, we're here today kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big
although I feel like even though Qualcomm has Snapdragon 410, the mid-range will take a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so A53 was their first. That precedes A57 in chronologically.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe we will see it quicker than the high end.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think that there's a longer tail there.
Yeah. That's true.
Like their adoption cycles are longer.
But even
I don't know
like
how fast they're
like
refreshing it.
64-bit, and that's their entry level.
That's important. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just glad to see it as a swift transition.
Yeah. No, me too. Definitely.
But we did a bunch of analysis about Denver in the article. Nothing's confirmed yet, but I'm fairly confident.
It was fairly surprising that they showed that.
I agree. Yeah, they showed it running.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of, I say this as a former Transmeta user, I feel like there's a lot of potential for that being a very low power design. The question is how much performance do you give up to get there?
Right.
And what other, if
then
any,
and the 4+1 went away.
Yeah.
The +1 went away.
Thank God. Like that's, I mean, it's funny to me that we've really come full circle, right? From 2 cores to 5 to 8, for some of these other guys.
Right.
Back down to, oh no, really you just need 2 really good cores.
Even though some players that went from 1 to 2 and just stayed at 2.
Yes.
Like
yeah. I mean, it's good to see, actually. I'm kind of happy that Merrifield is a 2-core design.
Yeah.
Because I think I would rather use that die area for delivering better single-threaded performance.
Right.
Because I think that's still paramount in mobile.
But it's funny, yeah, it definitely is a markability issue. In some, especially in China, you want to see the 4 cores, even if they're A7s or A5s.
I always hear that argument, but I always feel like people get over it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you give
I
them
don't
a
know enough
demonstrably
about
better
what that
experience.
phenomenon is.
Yeah. It's the, someone buying at Best Buy and has no idea what they're doing, right? Like they're just like,
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't understand what it is either. But I think that it's weird that that's become another checkbox feature.
I know.
And that
and it's a
people
dangerous
will
feature.
look at it as a regression, just superficially.
Well, which is why they're calling them super cores, right?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, obviously they even knew it,
Yeah.
right? Super duper cores is what we'll have next.
Awesome. Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you for watching. We'll be bringing you CES coverage all week. And thanks to Intel and Intel Studios for putting all this together for us.